everybody. I'm Soda.
And I'm KLMeri.
This time we are going to talk about Spock, or more likely Spocks. The Spock archetype character. Character archetype. Spock was the breakout character of the original series. He is certainly, I think, the most recognizable Star Trek character.
Yes, I agree.
And I think ever since the original Spock, every series, every iteration of Star Trek tried to have a Spock-like characters. Sometimes a few characters that are like Spock, I think. I think the Spock archetype is it has many facets, so there are many types of characters that can fit into the description of the Spock. In most series, in some series, it's very obvious who the Spock is. Today we're going to compare the original Spock to the various iterations of his character from the other series and movies.
That's a great introduction, Soda. The first thing that comes to mind is, what are the facets of a Spock type character? Maybe we should just talk about what those are.
Yeah. Well, first of all, and the most obvious, I think, is that Spock is the second in command, kind of the second fiddle to the Kirk, the captain.
That's right. It's kind of ironic because in a way, he's a character that's more popular than the captain, which you would think is the male lead or the hero of the show.
But I think that's kind of the reason why he's popular, because he doesn't have this burden of leading. He doesn't have to convince everybody of his opinions or his ways.
Yep.
So he's allowed to be a little more subversive, a little more out there.
Sometimes a little more opinionated.
Exactly.
So much so that he might be considered a stick in the mud.
I mean, it depends on the kind of character that he is, right?
Right.
I mean, sometimes the Spock character in the original series, of course, he was kind of stick in the mud, but in other shows, he's not always like that.
Yep, I agree. I could definitely think of someone who comes to mind.
Yeah.
What would you say? A sense of curiosity?
I think most Star Trek characters, the main crews we follow have a sense of curiosity because it kind of comes with the territory of being space explorers. But I think another very defining quality of the Spock is his alienness.
I was going to say his uniqueness, something that makes him unlike the other members of the crew.
That's also true, but more often than not, he's an actual alien because this is Star Trek.
Yeah.
So he both brings to the table a suitcase of a different culture and different values, and a different way of looking at the world, at the universe, even.
Okay, so we've established he's pretty high up in the chain of command, so second in command. He is most often an alien. So what other things make a Spock-type character?
I think one of the most prominent thing about a Spock character is that the writers usually use him to examine humanity. Usually the Spock character kind of learns to be human in a way, learns what it means to be human.
I would say in some cases this causes an identity crisis, but in other cases it's more of being a human is just not something I am close to or know very well, but in like you said, in a way it's sort of an exploration of what is humanity.
Yeah.
And often you hear lines like, you're very human. At some point for the Spock type characters, and you can't really decide if that's an insult or not because they're not human.
Well, yeah, but I think most of the examples I think of, with some exceptions, there are some exceptions. the Spock character is somehow related to humanity. I mean, Spock himself was half human. His mother was human. And I think other Spock-type characters also have some sort of relationship with humanity. Like a very... I don't know if I can call it a physical one, but like a palpable one.
A close tie to humanity.
Yeah.
Whether that is a blood relation or
cultural relation.
Cultural relation, like creator, who knows?
Yeah. So I think those are the three defining characteristics. Do you have another one?
I mean, there's a few things that are, quote, Spock-like, I think, in my opinion. And it could just be because it was the Spock original character, but one of them is he's often got a tense relationship with his crewmates because he is not human, or his lack of understanding of humanity. And I think the other one is sometimes he's shown as a very unflappable character. You know, everybody else is in the crisis mode, and this is the sort of like the Tin Man. His reactions are different than everybody else's. In Spock's case, him being a being of logic and having emotion not in the mix, it was very hard to like fluster him in any situation.
Yeah, that's true.
So sometimes that can be seen as like the quote opposite of human, like having no sense of humor. Do you know what I mean? It's very weird because those are just some very Spock things, but they don't necessarily carry through. Like you said, they kind of pick and choose what makes the Spock type character in each show.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that's why I said that's like, I think in some shows there are various characters that can fit the Spock.
And then there's the other one. If he's being very like stoic, he might also be very sassy.
That's true. Sassiness is an important characteristic.
Yeah. But I agree with you on the three main, and then the others are just sort of as they see fit to write them into the archetype.
Yeah. So shall we start then?
Let's get started. Let's take the shows in order.
Okay. So we're starting, of course, with The Next Generation, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think for most people, when they first watched The Next Generation, the one character that stood out... Oh, you know what? Before we start, I'll say another characteristic of the Spock character.
Yeah.
They are the breakout character.
Yes.
Usually.
Yes.
They're very, very popular.
Yeah.
So it relates to this because I think for most people who started watching The Next Generation, the breakout character and the character that reminded people most of everyone of Spock is, of course, Data.
Yeah.
Data is an android. He's not strictly an alien, but he is kind of analytical and calculatory and not very emotional. And so he really did remind a lot of people of Spock. He wasn't the second in command, but he was a bridge crew member. He was, what was his title? Operations officer?
I think so. He sat at the helm most often. But he wasn't considered like a navigator. Yeah, I think you're right. And something else about Data, he doesn't know what it is to be a human.
Yeah, I think that's kind of interesting because Data's journey and Spock's journey are kind of opposite in that Spock is set out to prove he's not human despite being half human, while Data is all android. He's not biologically human in any way, but he wants to be human.
I think one of the things about his character is it raises not just questions of like what is humanity, but it raises the question of like what is life.
Yeah.
What do you consider living? I think there's a particular episode around that when it introduces I can't can't even remember what their name are. The little bot things that we saw in the lower decks. We saw that one character.
I don't really remember.
It'll come to me. The little machines that were built to solve like engineering problems. But we saw one of those in Lower Decks. That was actually in the final episode of Lower Decks, where she was a new recruit, and Tendi.
I don't remember her being in the Next Generation episode. Interesting.
It was an episode that actually raised the question of Data was convinced that these. Now I'm gonna have to look it up. So these little engineering bots that this woman had created, she had made them to be like the most efficient way to solve an engine failure, and they needed it to basically work on this new prototype that they were testing. And anyway, the question comes up, are these things human? Because you're showing a self-awareness. And then she argues they're machines. They can't be. But then she considers Data to be more than a machine, and he's like, and he goes to Dr. Crusher and says, like, what is the definition of life?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of episodes in Next Generation that explore what is life, what is human through Data. Like, I think the most famous episode in the second season is the one where basically the fact of if his Data human, his Data a living being, is like put to trial. Like his future depends on him being proven to be a living being.
Yeah, they're called exocoms.
Oh, exocoms. Okay.
Yes, that's the episode that introduces exocoms. So that we.
I don't remember them at all. Sorry.
Yeah.
But if I do remember this episode is basically the basis of the Picard series, the Measure of a Man.
Yes.
Where basically the show kind of asks if Data is living, and if he isn't a living being, he can be forced to basically be dismantled and be studied. But if he is a living being, then they can't force him to do it against his will.
Yes.
And of course, in Picard, we later see that the Federation later built a lot of androids who are thought to be not as conscious as Data, but then it gets complicated. I don't want to get into Picard, but
right.
But Data is he is often used to explore the question of what is living, what is being human. Like I said, he really wants to be human. Unlike Spock, who kind of wrestled against being human, Data really, really wants to be human. His greatest journey is learning about emotions. Which a lot of people find kind of weird, because a lot of people kind of saw Data as showing emotions, just not exactly the same one as the other people in the crew.
Yeah. I think one episode that was a really good parallel between like Spock's journey and Data's is, and again, the names elude me, but Data is sent down to negotiate with this rediscovered colony, people who had lost contact with Starfleet like generations ago. And in the course of that, he meets one of the colonists who has a crush on him. And he's very explicit, like, I do not feel love. And it reminds you of the Spock episode where Spock also is confronted with someone who has a crush on him.
Yeah.
He insists that he is not capable of love, and then of course he gets happy spored just to force the issue. But I think that plays into the concept of Data saying, like, learning what emotions are, and about that. That's definitely a huge part of his journey.
Yeah, but like I said, a lot of people kind of saw Data as having emotions. I mean, in a lot of episodes, he was curious, he was protective, he was scared for his friend's life. One of the most defining relationship in Data's character is his friendship with the chief engineer, Geordi LaForge.
Yes.
And in a lot of episodes, you can see Data being very afraid for Geordi when Geordi's in danger. Not as afraid, for example. He doesn't show fear as much as the other characters, but you can see him being very, I guess you can say, kind of nervous about, Geordi surviving dangerous situations.
Well, don't forget his cat.
Yeah, exactly.
Spot.
Spot.
So
Spot is
he
very,
actually,
very important.
puts himself into the role of being a caretaker of another living being.
Yeah.
Not something I can say we saw Spock do in the original series.
Yeah. Well, we then later found out that Ezra and Spock did have a pet too.
That's true.
Not a cat. but that's also another thing. There is a famous scene where Data has to go and he leaves Spot in the care of Worf.
Oh, yes.
And seems to have a very hard time letting go.
He keeps telling Worf all these things he has to do to take care of Spot, and Worf is just like, I'll just make sure he doesn't die.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yes, Worf is less interested in caring for something than Data is.
Yeah, well, I mean, Worf isn't connected to Spot, but he admires Data, he respects him, so
Right.
he does it for him. But yeah, so I think a lot of people kind of assume that Data has some sort of emotions, and his real journey is just realizing he does feel emotions, just learning what kind of emotions he can feel and learn about them. And then in the movies, the Next Generation movies, they I think a lot of fans are also kind of angry about them just giving Data an emotion chip.
I kind of understand that viewpoint, because in the series, they made it such a big deal about what did his creator intend. And you come to learn that Data's neural network is supposed to grow with him, right?
Yeah.
So, for instance, he learns how to dream, or he starts to dream, and that's just part of his growth. He may be an android, but he is not stagnant in any sense. So, as he grows, I guess, inside, so grows his capacity to be human. And as you said, people did see him as displaying behavior that means he is caring, that he wants to protect people. So things that you normally associate with being human. And then just to give him an emotion chip is
it's kind of an easy way out.
It's an easy way out, but also like throwing it in your face.
Yeah. It feels like the entire journey was for nothing, because he could have just, cheated through it with just a chip. It's just, what did it mean, having gone through all this journey of learning and growing, just to have a chip give it all to you?
Yeah. I mean, it in a way, I think some people thought was the message. He couldn't reach it on his own.
Yeah.
He had to be given assistance.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I was going to talk about just Data as a commander, because you did say Spock-type character is someone who is second in command or in a position of command. It makes me think of the episode where Spock is actually in charge of an away mission, the Galileo 7, and you see how at odds he is with those he is commanding, because they feel he's not human enough to... basically to, what's the word I'm looking for? Not to deal with the situation, but to give it the credence that it's due, because of the fact that people have died. Yeah. And they're in a very dangerous type, perilous, precarious situation that requires probably more than logic to make everybody feel comfortable that they're going to survive.
Yeah, he lacks certain sensitivity.
So there are instances where Data is actually in command of the Enterprise. You recall the one where Picard and Riker are on the, I can't remember if they're pirates or not. But that whole episode where they're trying to steal the Vulcan artifact.
Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
And it just, to me, it harkens back to what is Data like as someone who's in command of a vessel and has to make command decisions.
If we're talking about the Galileo 7, I think there is an episode that is more of a parallel to it. I can't remember its name, but when Data is basically given a temporary command of a different ship, and people are giving him a hard time because he's an android.
Yes, exactly. So they're not even like the Enterprise crew who are
familiar with
him and just used to taking orders from Picard and not necessarily Data, but who respect him, as opposed to a entirely different crew that's like, you're not even a thing, like a being. What are you?
You're like a toaster.
Exactly. Are you just like the same as like having that artificial intelligence run the ship?
Yeah. And I think, there's a difference here, because I think a lot of people kind of thought that Spock got, like, unfairly judged in the Galileo 7.
Yeah.
I mean, he was trying to keep he wasn't maybe a little insensitive toward the dead, but he was also very much trying to keep the living ones alive. that was his main priority. And the crew seemed unreasonably angry about that.
Yes.
But I think they kind of tried to fix it with the Data episode, because Data very much proved at the end, like, he managed to command the respect of the ship crew at the end of that episode.
Yes.
So that was a nice one.
Are there any other ways that Data is like Spock?
What I want to say, and I forgot earlier, is that we talked about, the connection they have to humanity. Spock is half human biologically. Data was created by humans.
Yes.
He was created kind of intentionally to be like humans. So he looks kind of humanish. I'm not sure why Dr. Nguyen Sung, who created him, gave him yellow eyes, and this very white skin thing. But it is what it is.
I mean, I totally agree. There's that human factor. It's the fact that Data is created by human, and as we come to learn, the objective for him as an android is to learn to be as close to a human as he can.
Yeah.
To be as human-like as possible, which plays right into Data's desire to be a human.
Yeah, that's true. And like I said, like Spock was the breakout character of the original series, Data was the breakout character of the Next Generation. He's probably the most popular character of the series.
Absolutely. I think when there was talk of the Next Generation coming back in like a rebooted fashion, or for instance in this Picard continuation, the first question on everyone's mind was, Data?
Yeah.
Or is Data coming back? It's just like everybody, like, where's Spock?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There's a hype for that particular character, and again, like you said, it's because he's the breakout popular character of the show.
Okay, so I think we kind of wrapped up about Data, but I do want to say that, like I said, there are a few characters that can fit the mold of Spock, and I think Data isn't the only character who fits the type in the Next Generation. Data was an android, which means he was alien in the sense he was different from everybody else, but he wasn't a species in himself. Doesn't have a cultural baggage different than humans.
Yeah.
But there is another character who does, and I think he also kind of fits the mold of the Spock in the series, maybe to a lesser extent than Data, but still, and that is Worf.
I'm right there with you. Worf, he's not human. He's another race entirely. He's raised by humans.
Exactly.
And yet he bucks the idea that he could be human in some of his mannerisms. So it's very closer to the Spock of like denying the fact that you have human influence in your life.
I think if Worf is a little different, he's not exactly Vulcan, but because of the way he was raised, Spock was raised on Vulcan by a Vulcan father and under very, very strong pressure to be as Vulcan as he could.
Yes.
Worf was kind of the other way around. He was raised by humans on Earth, and most of his interaction with he's a Klingon, so most of his interaction with Klingon culture is kind of through a third party, I would say. He reads about them, he knows, he explores, but he very rarely talks to other Klingons. He doesn't have a meaningful relationship with any other Klingon. So he's trying to fit like the ideal that he reads about, but he doesn't really know the nuances of Klingon culture.
I would add here that whereas Spock's upbringing, there was a source of contention on whether or not he was Vulcan or human. With Worf, there's no source of contention there. His human parents very much just want him to be himself.
Yeah.
And so that's really what plays into his desire to be who he is and to know what it is to be a Klingon, which is an important part of his journey in the show. But at the same time, when you add into the fact that he has a son who he, at some point leaves with his parents to raise on Earth.
Well, but I think it's kind of interesting because Worf's journey is trying to be more Klingon because he wants to be more connected to his roots.
Yes.
Not necessarily because he balks at being human. He is Klingon. He just wants to be, part of his roots. His parents died when he was young. He later discovers he has a brother on the Klingon homeworld on Kronos. And then he's just trying to reconnect with his roots, and he's trying to be as Klingon as possible, but he's kind of also learning that the ideal that he read about isn't really practiced in real life, not
right.
Most Klingons can't fit that ideal.
Yes. Klingons are as varied as humans are.
Exactly. And he learns that, and I think it's kind of the funny thing is that with his son is kind of the opposite of him. First of all, his son is the product of him, Worf, and a woman who's half Klingon, half human. So his son is 1/4 human, and his wife, she didn't marry him, but she kind of married. I don't understand the Klingon rituals, so I don't know. They have a lot of rituals, but his partner, the mother of his child, didn't really like being Klingon. She kind of denied being Klingon, and her son kind of came out like her, like he was 3/4 Klingon, but he much rather practiced human culture. He much better enjoyed being human, and that really frustrated Worf.
It did. I actually just recently rewatched the episode A Fistful of Datas. I always find that episode so funny because of just how excited little Alexander is to be in a Western, like playing dress up and, pretending to be the deputy to the sheriff, and Worf is just like, what are we doing here? What is this purpose? But it just reminds you of like his son just being just being his age. Something you would expect a human child to do. Not with weapons, but with imagination.
Yeah, and there is one episode I really like in The Next Generation is Worf's son Alexander befriending Deanna Troy's mother, Roxanne Troy.
Oh yeah, I'd forgotten about that.
Best friends, and it's really cute because it's kind of you feel kind of sad for Alexander. His mother dies when he's very young, and his father just doesn't know how to handle him. And he's just kind of misunderstood by everybody around him. And then Roxana comes in, and she's like his cool grandma.
I also think it's sort of a paradox for Worf because he's not like an in-between child of two worlds in a sense that he's like half and half, but he's still stuck between two worlds because Klingons look at him and think not Klingon enough, raised by humans, and humans, look at him and think Klingon, because that's what he is.
And it's kind of interesting that, like we said, the Spock character tends to be very stoic and such, and Worf is very stoic. And at first you kind of think, that's because that's what Klingon culture is. But then you meet other Klingons, and they're actually very loud and boisterous, and they love telling stories and singing songs and making jokes. And like, no, that's just who Worf is.
Worf is just very no nonsense type of guy, which is a Spock trait.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing that kind of, it's not really a human thing, it's just a war thing that makes Klingons kind of wary of him, because he's not as, camaraderie as them. He's not very, I don't know, I don't know how to call this kind of personality of like, being broy, I guess.
Say the word clingy, but that's not the right word either.
No.
Yeah. It's definitely a type of like camaraderie that is born from being like a social race.
Yeah.
They're very social.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Worf is not.
There is a joke that's the way it is, because Worf was not just raised by human, he was raised by Russians. So that is a very Russian character. So yeah.
Shall we move on?
Well, before we move on to the next show, we talked about two aspects of Spock, but one aspect of Spock is that he is the second in command. And, well, the second in command in the Next Generation, I think most people agree, is not very much like Spock.
It's the least Spock-like character.
Yeah. But there is one aspect in which, the second in command in the Next Generation, William Riker, kind of reminds me of Spock in one way, in that he is kind of the opposite of his commander, Jean-Luc Picard.
True.
So there's this, Picard is he's like the opposite of Kirk. He's very serious, he's very businesslike, he's very, formal, and Riker is like the opposite of all of those things.
But I think, if anything, Riker was built to be the Kirk character. The Kirk type, personality-wise. Not the captain, but, the playboy.
Yeah. The charmer.
The charmer. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, okay, so those are the characters that are kind of, have aspects of Spock in them in the Next Generation. I think most people would agree that Data is the most Spock-like character of them all. But I think Worf is also very, very much Spock-like.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah, so let's move on.
All right, Deep Space Nine.
Deep Space Nine. Deep Space Nine is a little tougher. But I think it's a little tougher because, unlike the original series and the Next Generation, most of the characters on Deep Space Nine are not humans. I
was going to say, it's a starbase full of aliens.
Yeah. So there isn't much, like, unlike, in the original series, we learned the most about Vulcans through Spock. And in the Next Generation, we learned the most about Klingons through Worf. But in Deep Space Nine, we learn about many, many alien races. We learn about the Bajorans and the Cardassians and the Changelings, and we also meet the Klingons again. And the Prophets, which are also an alien race. And the trio.
Ferengi.
And the Ferengi, of course. So we have a lot of characters who are kind of alien.
The question is, who's the most alien of the aliens?
Yeah, so I think we kind of have to ask, is not exactly who's the most alien, but rather, who is the one through which we learn the most about being human? And I think the answer to that is Odo.
Yes.
Odo is the most Spock-like characters of them all, I think, because, well, when we first meet him, Odo doesn't even know what race he is, like what species of alien he is. No one does, basically. Odo was kind of discovered by accident floating in space by Bajoran aliens under Cardassian occupation, and he was at first experimented on, and it took a while until he basically became his own person.
I think there was that episode where they mentioned how he, had nothing, right? they made Odo synonymous with nothing. It's like he has no friends. When he came, no past, really no actual, like, shape.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, you mean that, like, in one episode they revealed the meaning of his name. His name was given to him by scientists.
Yeah,
And his full name is Odo Ital, which in Cardassian language means nothing.
that's
Because
it.
he is nothing. They don't know what it is. What he is. Um, yeah, so Odo's kind of start off as kind of the most aloof of all the characters. He's on the station as the head of security, the chief of security. And most people call him constable. I think the most close, most people kind of liken his job to being a cop. He's more like a mall cop in a way,
Yes.
because he guards the promenade where all the shops are. So he's kind of like the mall cop.
I just pictured him on a Segway riding down the.
All the criminals.
Yeah.
So yeah. But the thing is, he's aloof. He's good at his job, but he is kind of aloof because he was kind of burned by interaction with not with humans, but with Bajorans and Cardassians and other, people basically. He isn't like them. He doesn't breathe. He doesn't eat. He doesn't have he has the shape that he usually takes, but his real shape is like goo.
Yeah.
He can become whatever he wants. And so he kind of, I think at the start of the show, he kind of denies that he has feelings or emotions, which is a line that we saw with a lot of Spock characters. And then slowly throughout the show, he kind of learns to accept that he has emotions and he has feelings and he has friends and even love.
I mean, all I have to say is he's like the best undercover agent ever.
Well, yeah. Well, of course. I mean,
Yeah.
he can become a table, so.
Or a pet targ.
Yeah. He's kind of a tragic character, unlike Worf and Spock, who was pressured to be Vulcan, and Worf, who strived to be Klingon. Odo, at first, doesn't even know what he is. He's just a thing that no one understands. And then at the beginning of the third season, he discovers his species finally. But that brings a whole new set of troubles for him because his species turn out to be kind of the warlords from the other side of the galaxy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he has to kind of make a choice between his species that he wanted to find for so long and the people he lived with. He's basically his chosen family.
I guess one thing we didn't talk about, like with Spock, is the Vulcan thing about him being his telepathy.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily that Odo is by any means telepathic, but I think it's the nature of his shape shifting that he can connect to people.
Yeah, I think his species is hinted to be some sort of touch telepathic, like Vulcan have their own, that they put the hands on the face and say these things. They connect to people. His species has linking, which is similar in a way. Like they link with someone and they can basically read their minds.
Yeah, they call it linking, not mind melding. So I kind of assumed there was a little bit of a difference there because one, like, his people don't like to be solid.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, it's touch telepath. Like you just think of like literally touching somebody, and anyway, it's there's a distinction there.
Well, in the show, it's kind of not clear who he can do this with because we saw he can. Well, obviously, changelings. He's a changeling. Changelings can link with each other. We saw him link with a solid at one episode, but we also were told that he can't link with another solid. So solids are what they call non-changelings, basically. So it's kind of interesting how it works. We never really find out.
We should just mention Lieutenant Worf is in this show.
Yeah, true.
So, all the things we said about Worf still hold here. because he's Worf. But some of the things that like Odo and Worf had in common are just their general like personality, sort of like the standoffish, no fun, don't drop in on me unexpectedly
they're
type
kind
of
of
mannerism.
antisocial. We don't want to interact with too many people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they have this kind of thing. They don't interact much in the show, but when they do, it's very clear that they have that in common,
Mm-hmm.
and they kind of respect each other because of that. They're both very professional and very impersonable. Like they're not very, they're not friendly.
They're both very much like bring these bad guys to justice.
Yeah, very much.
They have that in common too.
Yeah. One more thing I want to say is about Odo. Odo is not the breakout character of Deep Space Nine. Actually, I can't really pinpoint. But maybe there is one breakout character, but he's like a minor character, so it's very weird. But generally, Deep Space Nine didn't have really a breakout character.
Yeah, that was actually my next point. Odo is sort of the Spock type character, but he's not a breakout. His popularity is, I would say, probably no more than some of the other characters.
Yeah, he's kind of one of the characters. I think it's because, unlike in the other shows, in Deep Space Nine, almost everybody got character development.
Yeah.
And like one of the characteristics of the Spock and the Data is that they got a lot of character development, unlike other characters. But in Deep Space Nine, almost every character got developed.
And also more screen time.
Yeah. Well, another character that we can talk about in the sense that, well, they're second in command is, of course, Kira, Lieutenant Kira.
Yes.
I don't think she embodies the Spock characteristics very much. She's a lot more passionate, a lot more lively. I also don't think she's that much an opposite to the captain, to Sisko.
I agree with all those points because Sisko can be very aggressive when he wants to be.
Yeah.
Like her.
Kira basically starts out at being very angry at everybody. But she's very close to Odo. She starts out as best friend. Then they develop a romantic relationship. But one character, now that I think about it, there is one characteristic of Spock that doesn't exist with Data or Worf, but does exist with Odo, which is a sort of antagonistic relationship between the calculated Spock, and the emotional other guy.
Mm-hmm.
And, like Spock had a very antagonistic relationship with Bones, Odo has a kind of antagonistic relationship with resident con man Quark.
Well, I mean, that's because Odo stands for justice and the law, and Quark does not.
Well, yes, that's true, but also a lot of their arguments are about, Quark trying to get Odo to enjoy life a little more.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yep. That's so true. Quark is, I don't know, like, a lot of people liked Quark.
I like Quark.
I wouldn't call him a breakout character, but he's pretty well liked for being who he is.
I think, well, we can talk, I think there is one breakout character, and we can talk about it in the Spock context. I think the actual breakout character of Deep Space Nine is Garak.
Yeah, he definitely has a character arc.
Yeah. Which is interesting because he's not a main character.
No.
I don't know how much of Spock, he's an alien, he's kind of the representative of his alien group, but he's not very much like Spock. Yeah, in any way.
I don't know, like, Garak for me I was always, like, on the fence, like, is he good or is he not?
Well, that's kind of his thing. You're supposed to wonder.
I don't ever feel like I landed on one or the other. Yeah. Because sometimes you hope, like, the morally gray, like, could be a villain, probably is a villain type characters have a redemption. For me, it was always questionable, even though I know there are other fans who felt differently.
Yeah, I think Deep Space Nine had very few strictly good or bad sides. Like, there were sides that were obviously evil, but a lot of them were just kind of gray, like, well, the Dominion is obviously the evil side.
Yeah.
But even when you look at like Cardassia, you had the good Cardassians and you had like bad Cardassians. You had all sorts of Cardassians in the middle. Like, I think it's a hallmark of Star Trek that, good and evil are not very well defined. It's not like, Star Wars where you have the evil empire and the good guy, the good rebels.
You definitely even have the bad Starfleet,
Yeah, exactly.
The ones who want the war, and then you have the Vulcans, for crying out loud, who have their, like, factions.
Exactly. Everybody's kind of gray. There are a lot of shades of gray. And Garak is a very gray character. He's a very gray character. So, yeah, but the thing is, well, to be back on topic, I don't think he's very Spock-like in a way. Aside from being, a breakout character.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Okay, so shall we move to the next one?
Yeah.
I think Voyager is kind of a return to old form, because one of the things that made Deep Space Nine so different from the other shows is that it took place on a space station, and it had kind of a multicultural kind of crew that wasn't all Starfleet either. Like, it had Starfleet and it had non-Starfleet personnel. But Voyager takes place on a Federation starship with mostly a Federation crew. I think we both know who the Spock character is, but she only joins in the 4th season, so I have an interesting question is, who was the Spock character until then?
I've never thought about that. I always just kind of assumed it was her. That's a good question. I don't know.
I have my own answers.
I don't think I have one for you, because for me, like, there is Voyager. There's pre-season 4, post-season 4.
Yeah. Well, I think most people kind of divide Voyager that way. But
yeah.
Well, I think for one thing we have, we have Cass, right?
Yes.
Cass is kind of Cass is kind of a weird alien in the sense that she is something we haven't seen before, which is an alien with a very short lifespan. Like, her species live for 10 years. She's 2 years old and already a young adult. So her species live very, very short lives. But she also discovers she has abilities that are beyond her species. So she does have a sort of tension of learning about her abilities and her humanity and stuff. But she's also kind of in tune with her emotions and stuff. So she's not that much of a Spock character, right?
Right.
And then we also have a resident Vulcan on Voyager.
Yes.
Tuvok. But the difference, and Tuvok also kind of, there is a second in command on Voyager, but he's barely there. I'm sorry, Chakotay fans, but Chakotay is kind of a non-character, right? He's barely a character. So Tuvok is kind of more of a second in command to Janeway than Chakotay is, I think. Janeway is, of course, the captain. She consults him with her issues much more than Chakotay. That's what I feel.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if Chakotay wasn't there, he would have been her second in command.
I agree.
They are best friends and they have a very, strong connection. But the thing is, because Tuvok is old. Spock is relatively young for Vulcan. Tuvok is in his 140 or something like that. He's kind of middle-aged Vulcan.
Yeah. I guess for me, mentor-mentee relationship between Tuvok and Cass, he's not trying to make her like a Spock, but because he is a Vulcan, he helps her be more contained. Yeah, because that's part of her problem, right?
Yeah. But I was going to say, because he's older, he's not he already knows who he is. Spock is kind of on his journey to realize who he is and, find out about himself. And Tuvok is already past that. He's a father. He has teenage kids. He's I don't need this anymore. I already know who I am. I'm not this young adult kind of self-discovering journey. Um, and then there is a character that I would say is the most Spock out of the pre-season 4 characters, which is the EMH. Because the EMH, also known as the Doctor,
The Doctor,
he's a holographic doctor that he's supposed to be for emergencies only, but because Voyager kind of loses its doctor in the first episode, he kind of runs full time. And over the course of the series, because he runs full time, he develops a life, basically. He's not supposed to have that, but he becomes more and more rounded and more human, and he kind of, discovers what it means to be human by living.
If you focus on that one, like, real character trait of journey to humanity, that is the Doctor. Yeah.
He's going through a journey to humanity, and he goes through a lot, actually. He has a personality from the get-go because he's based on the personality of his creator.
Right.
Much like Data, in a way.
Yeah.
But unlike Data, he wasn't supposed to be a full-fledged person. But he somehow becomes one because he runs for so long. And later he also gains mobility. He gains the ability to walk outside of the med bay, which he couldn't do in the first few seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And, he develops hobbies, he develops interests, he develops relationships with other people.
So this may sound strange, but to me, I always thought, like, Data was the Spock-like character, but the Doctor was the Data-like character.
Exactly, and I think by the law of transference, that means that he's also the Spock-like character. Because he is kind of on the journey to find out what being human means.
Again, what constitutes life? That is the question.
And a lot of episodes in Voyager kind of wrestle with the question, is he a living person?
Yes, very true. So shall we talk about 7 of 9?
Yeah, so in season 4, Voyager gains another character, which is 7 of 9, which I think most fans will agree is the Spock-like character of Voyager. 7 of 9 is human, but as a child, she was taken by the Borg. And she basically grew up being a Borg.
Yeah.
And when she encounters Voyager, it's basically her first encounter with humans since she was like 6 years old.
When they introduced her, she was really meant to replace Kes. And I thought, she was supposed to be like the opposite of Captain Janeway. Sort of like in that Spock is a foil for Kirk. I think what's most interesting is that it doesn't necessarily end up that way.
I think of all the characters we discussed until now, she is the most Spock-like because she develops a very close relationship with Janeway.
Yeah.
They become, but unlike Spock and Kirk, where it's more like friends,
Mm-hmm.
Janeway and 7 of 9 are more like mentor-mentee, kind of like Tuvok and Kes.
Yes.
And basically, 7 of 9 kind of, they rescue her from the Borg, and she kind of has to learn to not be Borg. And I think unlike, Data and Spock and Worf, she doesn't have the option, and Odo, she doesn't have the option of being Borg, because being Borg necessarily means being part of the collective.
Right.
And because she's severed from the collective, so she can't be a Borg. So a lot of times she's kind of like in this in-between state, and she's very lost.
Mm-hmm. Well, she was Borg, so right, she was part of the collective. She doesn't know what it means to be an individual. It causes her some panic time and again.
Yeah.
In a way, it's actually kind of similar to the Doctor, because it's almost like she's having to redevelop her individualism.
Yeah, and they do help one another in a lot of episodes.
Mm-hmm.
I do think at some point they decided that he has a crush on her, which I didn't like, and a lot of other viewers didn't like very much. But yeah, they do have a kind of they do have kind of empathy for one another because they have a very similar journey.
Yeah, agreed.
And, like the Spock character, she is very rigid. She doesn't show a lot of emotions. She isn't a fun person. She's also kind of the science officer, like Spock was.
I've seen some fans argue that before 7 of 9, there was really this lacking humanity, the question of humanity in the show, even though you had the Doctor. And so that's really what 7 of 9 brought to the show, which made it more successful. Almost kind of like reviving it, which I find an interesting argument, but that is a characteristic of the Spock type character, right? Bringing that question of what is truly human.
Yeah, I think, but I do think that the Doctor is kind of the second most popular character after 7 of 9. So he was popular in his own right. But I think 7 of 9 kind of brought direction to the show because along with her came the Borg, basically.
Yeah, well, yes, that too. When in doubt, bring the Borg.
Yeah, I mean, the first 2 seasons had a villain, a recurring villain species, but they were very, very not liked, I can't even remember their names. I remember the fans I remember how they look, and the fans kind of called them cabbage heads because that's how they look. and they were very, very disliked. And then in the third season, the show finally got rid of them, and then it was kind of like meandering, didn't really have a direction. Voyager had a lot of problems. It had a lot of problems as a show. But 7 of 9 did bring the show some direction. I don't think it lacked in humanity. I just think it really lacked in some direction. Like, in a clear, set way of who's the antagonist and what is the point, basically.
To be honest, it really doesn't surprise me that she ends up back in the Picard show.
Yeah. I mean, she was the most... I think also the Picard show kind of like... she was a very well-liked character, but the show mistreated her and the actress very much.
Yeah.
And the Picard show kind of like fixed parts of that. Like, she was finally allowed to wear normal clothes, for example.
So from a Spock type, like being not standoffish, but like not engaged with the crew on a personable level. Like we said, with Worf being kind of antisocial and all of that, who really fits that bill in Voyager outside of 7 of 9?
Well, there's also Tuvok.
But see, that's the thing I don't get. Like, just because he's a Vulcan doesn't make him antisocial. That's not how it works.
I don't think that he's very antisocial. Like we said, he is very close friends with Janeway.
Yeah.
But you know what? Like we said, there is the antagonistic relationship between Spock and Bones and Odo and Quark. There is also a sort of antagonistic relationship between the resident Vulcan that is Tuvok and the Telexian Neelix.
Neelix, yeah.
Neelix. And Neelix is kind of, he's not like, Bones was kind of, he was kind of biking and sarcastic in his own right, and Quark was kind of a con man, but Neelix is like just a happy-go-lucky guy, and he's very, very much gets on Tuvok's nerves, and I think on a lot of viewers' nerves too.
I think we would call it like the characteristic like never losing his cool.
Yeah.
It's a Vulcan characteristic, not really being antisocial. Like, whereas to me, it's almost like you could spark the match with Worf.
Yeah.
He might not want to talk to you outside of ship's business, but it'd be very easy to get him into an argument.
That's true.
So, whereas Vulcans are known to be, very like cool-headed and rational, even if they will argue you in the politest tone of voice ever.
Yeah.
I think we just conclude that 7 of 9 really was the most Spock-like character.
Exactly, yeah. In a lot of terms. I mean, both on the journey to be human, their characteristics of, being calculated and cool, and also in that she was alien. and kind of didn't fit in with the rest of the people.
And the breakout character.
And the breakout character, of course.
Yep.
Is there any point of trying to compare Chakotay to Spock?
No.
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 Once again, sorry, Chakotay fans. Well, I mean, there is one aspect, I guess, in that a lot of people ship him with the captain.
Okay.
Yeah.
I always ship Janeway with herself.
I was going to say, but then again, a lot of people also ship Seven of Nine with the captain, so you know.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could get into a whole discussion on like who had that Kirk Spock type relationship.
And I think Seven of Nine and Janeway came the closest.
I agree.
Out of everyone. I
agree. All right, so shall we move on to Enterprise?
Yeah, let's move on. Well, Enterprise made it very easy because they basically kind of copied
the mold
original series formula, and like we have a very clear Spock character who is also a Vulcan, also a second in command, and also a science officer, and she's also the only alien on a ship full of humans. And this is, of course, T'Pol, the Vulcan representative, I guess we can call her.
Yeah, I was gonna say she's not in Starfleet. There's no Starfleet, so
yeah, there's no Starfleet at this point. There's just an Earth Space Force, whatever it was called, Space Agency.
There's United Earth. Yeah, United Earth, like officers, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah. And the Vulcans, of course, the first alien race to interact with humans, help them build better ships, and of course, at the time, the first Enterprise, was the fastest and best ship they built with the help of the Vulcans. But the Vulcans wanted a representative of their own to join, to see that the humans aren't misusing their brand new toy.
And for the first moment that they're, like the first episode, the first moment, you know, there's that contention between the second in command and the captain of the ship.
Not just that, even, I think between the entire crew and Spock, and the Spock character, which is T'Pol.
Exactly, yeah. She is literally the least liked person on that ship because she is not a human. And there really is a type of racism going on there.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it racism. I think the thing that Enterprise did the best was kind of portray the very interesting politics of the time, shall we say.
It's not racism, but I think I would call it like ethnocentrism. It's kind of what happens when we go to visit another country here and we think our country's better and have that sort of like stagnant, like we're superior to you view. I think that to me is like what's going on the Enterprise, because T'Pol is humans. Vulcans do it better. And the humans think they do it better.
Exactly. That's exactly how it is. Yeah, there is kind of, I like the interest in species politics, I guess you can say, in Enterprise. Because when you hear about the history that is told in the other series, you kind of figure that Vulcans and humans just became best of friends. But here you can see that it's not that way. It wasn't that easy. And there was a lot of mistrust and miscommunication in the first early days, and kind of T'Pol starts out as like really aloof and disconnected from everybody, but quickly enough she kind of warms to them. I don't think she learns to be human very much, but she learns to appreciate humans.
Maybe the moral of the story there is Vulcans and humans learning that they can get along and have the same goal. And can actually help each other achieve it, as opposed to her trying to fit in with the ship and be more like them. She maintains who she is throughout the show. And they eventually come to terms with that. We can compromise. We don't have to become like each other. We can just
Yeah,
compromise.
exactly. She doesn't learn to be human. She learns to appreciate humans, and
Yeah.
humans learn to appreciate her Vulcanness. So that's a very interesting journey, I would say.
I wouldn't call her the breakout character.
No. Is there a breakout
I was
character
gonna
in
say
Enterprise?
there's not. It's just a show of cowboys
Yeah.
and a Vulcan.
Yeah. Maybe the theme song is the outbreak.
Although, I mean, some people do have a favorite character.
That's true.
So, which for a lot of people is, Hoshi.
Hoshi? Really? I thought it was Trip.
Some people like Trip, some people like her. It just depends on who you ask.
I guess so. I saw a lot of people like Trip very much.
But sadly, I don't think the captain was by far, he's probably the least popular captain.
Probably, yeah. Well, there are even, as much as he's the least popular captain, there are even less, even worse character than him on the show. I mean, does anybody remember what Meriwether is or what he's supposed to do?
Oh, you know what? What about the Doctor?
Oh, Phlox? Oh, I love Phlox. He's great.
Yeah, you know what? He's not human.
He's not human, yeah, but he's also, he's not on any journey to discover his humanity, and he's also already likes humans when he joins the expedition. He doesn't even have to go through that journey. He's just he just like humans. They're interesting to me. He's alien in the sense that he introduces us to his alien culture, but that's about it, I think.
Yeah.
But he's kind of popular because he's kind of a chill guy that you just kind of enjoy watching.
Yeah, he's one of the more personable doctors in Star Trek.
Yeah, that's true. Does Paul have an antagonistic relationship? Well, she does kind of have. I think she kind of has sort of not really antagonistic, but kind of adversarial, to an extent, relationship with Trip.
Yeah.
Because he's kind of trying to make her more human and introduce her more to human culture. You remember when he convinces her to watch movies with the rest of the crew? He tries to introduce her to humor and to basically other human stuff. Well, there is a breakout character now that I think about it. Much like Deep Space Nine, it was also a minor character.
Who?
Shran.
Oh.
A lot of people like Shran.
Okay, well, maybe. I can see it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Shran wasn't in as much episodes as Garak in Deep Space Nine. Then.
I mean, he's literally the only Andorian.
He is. Well, he and his crew. He has a crew usually.
In all the cast of the shows.
Yeah, I mean, the show kind of only lasted. It lasted 4 seasons, which is 3 seasons shorter than the other shows, except for the original series, of course. But yeah, he didn't appear in that many episodes. But whenever it was in an episode, he kind of stole the show. He was also played by an actor that everybody loved.
I'm trying to think of his name.
Yeah. Me too. I know he's very popular. Don't kill us.
Jeff Combs.
Yeah, Jeffrey Combs. Yeah, so Jeffrey Combs, for those who don't know, is a character. Is an actor who appears in a lot of Star Trek show in different roles. He plays a lot of characters, and I think there was rumors that if Enterprise would have lasted to 7 seasons, he would have become part of the main cast.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. But then again, I kind of speed watched Enterprise. I was like, what are the better episodes? Let me skip all the not so good ones.
You might have been wise to do so.
Yeah.
But most of the good episodes have him in them, like so you kind of saw him probably. So all of his appearances probably. I think it was really in like 10 episodes or something like that.
Mm-hmm. So I've just looked him up. I didn't realize he played a prophet in Deep Space Nine.
Well, the prophets kind of sometimes took the form of the characters. So, like, yeah.
He played a Ferengi? Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
he played Brunt.
Yes, he did. I didn't realize that. It's all the makeup.
Yeah, he is a chameleon.
Oh, he played another Ferengi on Enterprise.
Yeah, he played one of the Ferengis on Enterprise. True.
Okay, so he was in Deep Space Nine a lot. Because I couldn't recall him playing anybody in The Next Generation. No, he was in Deep Space Nine mostly.
He was also in a Voyager episode, if I remember correctly.
We've talked about those shows. We don't need to talk about Discovery. Spock is in it.
But I think if we're going by the release, we should kind of talk about the other Spock, the different universe Spock.
No, back up. So Discovery. Is there a
Spock?
Yes.
I was going to ask, do the new shows have a Spock?
Yeah.
At all? Picard doesn't have a Spock. I think, well, there is data, but the thing is about Picard is that there isn't really a crew. You know, we don't really follow a crew.
Yeah. No. We follow Picard.
Yeah. And he kind of forms sort of a crew around him, but then we get Data back and we get 7 of 9 back, so it's not really a classic crew.
Yeah. I was thinking more of Discovery itself. Did they make a Spock-type character?
I think at first Michael Burnham was supposed to be a sort of Spock-type character, but they very quickly came off this idea because not only was she supposed to be a Spock-type character, she was also related to Spock, and
right.
It felt kind of forced, I think.
Well, I mean, to me, her journey is not like how to be more human, because she is a human. She's been a human. She just happened to adopt Vulcan culture, so it's not like she doesn't know who she is.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, she's kind of like Worf was adopted by human parents, but in her case, like her adoptive mother was also human, so it wasn't that much of a culture shock.
I don't know that I would call her the breakout character.
Yeah, that's true.
Either.
I also think she doesn't really go through a journey. Like I said, I think that originally she was supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
I think, in the first episode, we kind of saw a show of what could have been, of like her life under Captain Georgiou as a second in command. And if we had a show about that crew at that time, she could have been like the Spock-like character.
Yeah.
But by the time we do get to Discovery, she's a very different person, and she doesn't go on a journey to search her humanity. She's kind of human enough already. There is also Saru.
I love Saru.
Everybody loves Saru. He's kind of the breakout character.
I agree. I think he's the breakout character, but I wouldn't put him on a journey to humanity.
No, he is not. We do kind of learn through him about Kelpian culture, though.
Which is awesome. So he's not human. He's breakout, and he's not ashamed of who he is.
Exactly. He's very not ashamed.
If he's going to be the prey, then, that's what he'll be.
And then he discovers he's more than he thought he was, which is also kind of nice.
Yeah.
And he even becomes captain in the third season. The thing about Discovery is that, in much of the same, we usually follow the bridge crew, like in most shows, but the captain keeps rotating.
Yes.
So it's kind of the main characters we watch are the bridge crew, but not necessarily the captain.
That is a very distinct difference from Discovery and the other shows. Yeah, the revolving door captain seat.
Exactly. Yeah, so I don't think, I think in a way, do you think we outgrew the need for the Spock character?
I was thinking so, simply because it's been done, as we've talked about in a number of shows, to varying
Yeah,
degrees of success, with more than one character to varying degrees. It just seems to me that maybe the Star Trek franchise has recognized that it is time to do something that isn't about a captain and crew. It's
yeah,
about just the crew or
yeah.
just the character. It's certainly a different formula, and it seems to have worked. Discovery is popular. People like it.
Yeah. There is also the question of, I think the most popular show that came out of the new wave, which is Lower Decks. I don't
Yeah.
think there is a Spock character in Lower Decks.
No, there isn't.
Yeah, I mean, we have an android and we have an alien, Tandy and Rutherford, but they're not exactly Spock type. They're
No,
just
and Rutherford
there.
is a human. He's just got some implants.
Exactly.
And unless he forgets he's human and then has to relearn it, I don't see him being a Spock type character. He's also just way too chipper.
That's true. And the same is true for Tandy
Tendi.
too.
Yeah.
She's very cheaper. And we also don't really learn much about her species, which I already said I am very sorry about. I would love to learn more about Orions.
Yeah, some of the throwaway comments bring up a lot of questions.
Yeah,
Yeah, are they still trying to go through some
reformation.
social reform or cultural reformation? I think we won't have a real answer to do we still need the Spock type character for a while, because we are bringing Spock back
Yeah,
in the new show.
yeah,
He came back in season 2 Discovery, like the Discovery version of Spock, which is supposed to
yeah.
be the younger version from the TOS. So we'll
And
have a show with him, and I think that will probably delay the answer for a while.
that's true. But like I said, I think Lower Decks will continue to be the most popular of the new shows. And I think this is kind of the new formula to go through. Like, don't focus so much on the main bridge crew, but rather on kind of like characters that would have been ignored in the old shows.
So, question: do you still keep them on a ship, or on a starbase, or do you try to switch things up and do a whole other type of show,
Like what?
like a colony, Starfleet colony?
I mean, it could be interesting. I think I saw once that after the original series, Gene Roddenberry was developing a few ideas for shows, and one of them was of a Federation hospital.
Hmm. I don't know if you know General Hospital,
No,
the
I
soap
don't.
opera, but
I know the show. I mean, I know hospital drama shows.
yeah.
So,
So this is longest running soap opera, General Hospital. I just suddenly thought of Starfleet Medical. It's like General Hospital, where it's all about who's dying and who's shacking up with who.
I mean, that would be super interesting. I mean, I think we can do different types of show now. I mean, Picard is a very different type of show.
What about an Academy show?
I think a lot of people would love that.
Yeah, I mean, you would have lots of races represented, because they're all coming in as new cadets. It's better than probably having them live in the bowels of the ship, because they're ensigns, in the lower decks. But you could have them going through the courses and trying to prepare to take the Kobayashi Maru or
Yeah, and just being teenagers. I think this
yeah.
would. I mean, this could very appeal to young viewers
Yeah.
if that's who the. I'm sure CBS is racking its mind trying to appeal to every demographic it can.
And then who knows? You probably would have a Spock type character. Maybe you could easily have them in that situation.
you can have Vulcans. You can have any species you want, basically.
Yeah. I always thought they could have done more with like the Romulan Vulcans.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that Picard has a lot more Romulans. I think the next season of Picard would be a lot more Romulan heavy.
And I guess I say that because having seen some of just what was going on, like talking about the Romulan Wars and Discovery, and then in the Next Generation, the whole like Romulan enemy arc. And then you sort of get interspersed in the movies where, you know, Spock is trying to go to Romulus and promote a peace treaty and unite Vulcans and Romulans and all this stuff. And it just, there's so much more there. What if you like took a Romulan from the future?
Well, that's what happened in Discovery. I think the next season of Picard would be much more Romulan heavy. Romulans were a big part of the story of the first season, so I think it makes sense. And yeah, I think Discovery probably will have more futuristic Romulans, and I guess we'll wait and see. Well, I think the last thing we should talk about is comparing this universe Spock to the alternate universe Spock.
I have done some Spock comparisons, character comparisons.
That's true. I think the main difference in the archetype, as we talked about, is that Spock is not the breakout character in the alternate movies.
Very true. No. That'd be McCoy.
That would be McCoy, yes.
Finally, his time to shine. Even if he has no lines. Very interesting. The other point I think about the alternate universe Spock is there's not enough material to give him a character arc. Other than just getting over his post-traumatic stress disorder from the destruction of Vulcan. And maybe learning what a friend is. But other than that...
He already has a girlfriend, so I think he knows what a friend is.
Right. And we've talked about how he's so much more emotional than his TOS counterpart. So really, that kind of undercuts the whole story of learning what it is to be a human, or coming to grips with his humanity. I mean, I honestly don't know that they could build that in, even if they did a fourth movie. Just wouldn't make sense.
True, that's very true. I think just I wonder if when they created the new movies, they kind of thought about, you know, how the Spock archetype kind of doesn't really fit with our modern pop culture, I guess.
Yeah. Yet they tried to keep the best friend relationship between Kirk and Spock. That's what I don't understand is, if you don't have Kirk like himself and Spock like himself, how is it going to work? How can you recreate what is so iconic of the Kirk-Spock duo and dynamic? So it feels off kilter. And I think it means, one, we don't, like, the Kirk type character is on steroids and the Spock type character is kind of non-existent, like, from certain aspects. So it shifts the whole dynamic. It makes it weird.
Yeah, it doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
So I think that's it. We pretty much covered the Spock archetype. Unless you have something to add.
No, I think we covered it very well.
Yeah. This was a journey. I think the Spock character went from being very, very popular to a point where we just kind of realized we kind of did it all. Everything we can. And we kind of need to start exploring humanity through new angles, more through like relationships, for example, than character archetypes.
Agreed. So we'll see what the creators come up with next.
Yeah, I mean, we still get Spock, like you said. The next series that is going to be released is...
And who knows, maybe that will revive the Spock love.
Yeah, maybe. Could be. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening to this very fascinating podcast on different Spocks in different shows. We'll be back next time with another podcast.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye.
Bye-bye.